Hello and welcome back to the Nikki Casa podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing all about my trip to Africa, where I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and had the most incredible life-changing experience. If you're listening to this on a podcast, you can actually check out the YouTube version. And on YouTube, I have added like videos. And so if you're keen to actually see more videos from the experience, you can continue this on YouTube and yeah, see the visuals and the videos from the experience. But I want to start by sharing more about the introduction of like why I went on this journey, why I said yes, and like the decision like process behind leaning into this experience because I've never done anything like this before in my life, anything where on this physical level, I've desired to lean into like a physical challenge like this. And the only thing I can really compare it to is like the Vipassana silent meditation retreat that I did last year when I was in Bali. And like that was the hardest thing I've ever done up until then. But that was such a mental challenge, although physically sitting in those seated positions and meditating for 10 hours a day was physically hard. It did not compare to the physical challenge that this mountain brought me. And also like the level of training that went into preparing for this experience. So I decided to go on this journey after a girlfriend. Her name is Georgia, and she reached out to me and she's like, Nikki, I'm going to Africa again this year, and I really think you would love it. And when she first asked me, like, I don't think I initially considered saying yes to this experience because I think it kind of scared me, like the amount of money to invest in something like this, let alone the physical challenge of summiting the highest freestanding mountain in the world. Obviously, Mount Everest is higher, but it's Mount Kilimanjaro is a freestanding mountain. So they say it's the highest freestanding mountain in the world. So I was like, holy shit, like that's scary. And I kind of just put it in the back of my mind though. And it wasn't until I then went to a personal development event here on the Gold Coast, like a week later, where at this event they asked all of us to reflect on what a life that is led by our deepest desires would look like, where fear is not a possibility. And I was like, huh, okay. So what would my life look like? And what would I do? And what would be the things I would like say yes to if fear wasn't an option? And I started to think about my life and my business. And I realized that so much of my energy and my time was purely dedicated to what I do as a business owner and as a coach. And although that's so beautiful, I also realized that there were other experiences and adventures that I wanted to also journey on that I was not even considering as a possibility for this year because of money and because it would mean I'd have to work really hard and therefore not be in my feminine energy, which is really important to me. And so I started to write all these things I wanted, and Mount Kilimanjaro was at the very top of the list. And then in the event, they asked us, now explore the limitations that come up for you when you think about these deepest desires. And for me, I had this voice that said, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And then there was this but, and then all these reasons why I couldn't do it came up. And so I want you to reflect on your life and all the things you wish you could do, that you want to do, that you dream about, and then where you put the but. But what? But why? But why can't you have that now? But why can't you do that this year? But why can't you take action towards it? Like, why don't you have that thing? And for me, what I realized was I was telling myself that I couldn't run a successful business and do all the things that I desire that are my personal fulfillments. And I realized that I was really limiting myself and living in this scarcity mindset of I can't do both. And when I realized that, I was like, of course I can do both. Like, if I want to live a life that is led by my deepest desires, then of course I can do both. And so I got back on the call with Georgia, and she's like, Nikki, when are you going to do something that is just purely to serve yourself? And I said to her, Georgia, it is a full fuck yes for me. Let's do it. I'm coming with you. And so this was probably like 10 weeks before we were to leave for Mount Kili. And so I pretty much started my training straight away. I bought some running shoes because your girl does not run. I do not run. And I was like, well, I need to build up like my cardiovascular training and really train my CO2, because the oxygen level on the mountain, like when you get up to a certain altitude, is like half. And I knew that when it came to that kind of fitness, like it's not my strong suit. I love Pilates. So I love the slow burn. I love core. I love, feeling strong externally with my muscles. Internally, I wouldn't say I was very fit. And so I started running, maybe like 3 or 4 times a week. And that was so hard. Like, I had a very love-hate relationship with running to begin with. Like, it just hurt so much. And I think that's because I wasn't used to it and never really been a long distance runner my whole life at all. And so those initial runs just hurt. The whole thing hurt. I was like, why do people do this? But I started to make progress, and that was really fulfilling and rewarding to have a purpose behind my training. Um, and that really pushed me to keep improving my running, and I started to get in the flow and the runner's high that people talk about, and that was so motivating and fulfilling and rewarding. And I really recognized in the initial stages of my training how having a purpose behind why you train and move, the stronger the purpose, the less you actually need motivation. I think oftentimes why we struggle to like meditate, or we struggle to be consistent with our nutrition and struggle to be consistent with like training, is because we don't have a strong enough purpose behind that. And therefore we rely on extrinsic motivators, like, oh, how I'm going to look and, how strong I'm going to get, instead of it actually be driven by intrinsic motivators. And what that means is internal motivators that have more gravity and substance to them. It's like, why is this so important to you that it could literally change your life? And when you get clear on that kind of purpose, then I really believe that it can motivate you to do things that initially you hated. Like for me, running. And so as soon as I had a purposeful reason, then running became like enjoyable. And on the days where it was hard and I didn't enjoy it, I was still motivated to put my shoes on and go for a run because I was motivated by something greater than, the discomfort, something greater than the resistance, something greater than wanting to just like do my usual Pilates class for that day. And so I really started to see like the benefits of saying yes to this experience and how much it was already starting to like improve the way that I saw like how I take care of my body and how I've just been doing it in this one-dimensional way with Pilates. And yet my body was feeling incredible being able to move in this new way. So yeah, my training was a really exciting part of the journey. And I tried to hike like once a week here down at the Gold Coast. There's so many beautiful spots to hike. And so I would find these, beautiful trails and some more challenging ones with a steeper incline and elevation. And that really just helped me get on my feet. I would wear my hiking boots so I could break my boots in. So they were really soft and malleable by the time I got into the mountain. And I found that really helped. I brought my pack out and my little water flask and yeah, just really leaned into replicating the conditions as much as I could that would be on the mountain and then just noticing how my body felt. Like being on my feet for 6 hours was really challenging on the soles of my feet and my ankles and my calves. And so I realized that running wasn't replicating the exact conditions of being on the mountain. So the training was really, really supportive and I learned a lot about my body and a lot about, how to take care of it through the recovery as well. Leading up to the trip, I noticed that I started to really fear the unknown, like traveling to Africa and going through the transits of like Singapore, and I transited through Ethiopia before I then went to JRO Kili, Tanzania. Like there was a lot of fear there of like going through customs and going through, the airport and having the right entries and the visas and the like what shots that I needed to get, like vaccinations. And, I didn't really want to just get vaccinated for the sake of it. And so I chose not to get the yellow fever shot, which is something that they check upon arrival into Tanzania. It's not actually mandatory, but they do ask you. And so there was a lot of fear of like, what if they ask and I haven't got it? And for some reason I needed it. And so there was a lot of like fear around not being able to control that in the initial stages leading up to leaving. And I really just trusted that if I was meant to be on that mountain, that I would. And no matter what happened through the transit, that we would get there. And I've been able to really develop a sense, like a deep sense of trust that I'm always held by the universe. And so no matter if all of those things did happen and I got stopped at the border and they wanted to question me, I was like, even if that does happen, I fully trust that I'm being supported by the universe and by God. And that if I'm meant to be on that mountain, then I will. And so that gave me a lot of like trust in being able to lean into that edginess and the fear of like traveling to a foreign country. And I think there's like a sense of liberation that comes from the process of that. I think that like, for example, I've never traveled to Europe because I would love to, but I'm terrified of traveling alone in a country like that. And so it's natural to have fears when it comes to leaning into something like this. What if something gets stolen? What if my bags don't arrive? Like, what if I get lost? And I think these fears are really natural when we leave our comfort zone. Maybe you've never traveled out of Australia before. And that's like really scary and uncomfortable for you to consider, like traveling overseas. But there is such a liberation that comes from the fear of the deep unknown and the fear of like, what if this happens? What if I get lost? What if something gets stolen? And being like, and if those things did happen, it's an opportunity for me to expand my ability to solve problems, to expand my ability to deal with the unknown. And so there's such a sense of liberation that can come from being terrified and scared of these things and still saying yes and being able to trust yourself as well. Like trust yourself that no matter what, that you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. And so may this be like permission slip for you to lean into something that maybe terrifies you, like traveling to a foreign country or doing an experience like this, and saying that it's okay to be scared because you're leaving your comfort zone. And that's the whole point. But liberation doesn't come from staying in what feels comfortable. Liberation and freedom comes from being able to lean into things that feel edgy and scary and doing it anyways. So my transit to Africa was actually okay. I had a uh 8 hour stopover. So I flew from Gold Coast to Sydney and then Sydney to Singapore. I then had an 8 hour stopover in Singapore. And I just found these day beds that I could lay on. I put my alarm on so I didn't forget when I was boarding my next flight. I had a few hour nap, got on my next flight to um, Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. Also had another 6 hour stop over there, and then got on the final plane from Addis Ababa to Tanzania. And coming into Tanzania, it was a really easy process at the customs. They asked me if I had yellow fever. I said nope. They said, how long were you in Ethiopia for? And I said 6 hours. And the cutoff is like 12 hours, I believe. So they're like, oh, you're fine, come straight through. And then you sign this little form that says where you've been and why you're coming into Africa. And then they look at your passport. And then he stamped it and I went straight through. So it's kind of like literally just like Bali. It's really easy and I absolutely had nothing to worry about. And then I got picked up by the Africa Visa team, which was the tour company that Mountains and Marathons, which was the company I climbed a mountain with. They then worked with Africa Visa. So they picked me up and then we had a 1 hour transit to where we were staying. So once I arrived, I actually checked into a separate Airbnb that from where I was staying with Mountains and Marathons. And that just gave me the day to just reset my body clock. And I'm really glad that I did that, came in a day early so I could just settle into the space and yeah, just like regulate my nervous system from the 35-hour transit. And then the next day was when we then checked into the resort that we were staying at for the 11-day experience with Mountains and Marathons. So the retreat was 11 days, but the hike on the mountain was only 7 days. So we checked in and that gave us the day to meet everyone else that we were like climbing with. I got to see my girlfriend Georgia for the first time in like over a year, which was really sweet. And we did an opening ceremony that night with the leadership partners, the two co-founders of Mountains and Marathons, Jamin and Jordan. And then everyone else, we did like this exploration around who we are, what our fears are, and, what we really desire to get from the mountain. And that was so beautiful to open the 11-day retreat with mountains and marathons. The next day, we then went into town to get any final equipment that we needed. I needed quite a lot of gear, and I decided to hire most of my gear because I didn't want to buy like down pants, like snow pants, big snow like down jacket, a head torch, hiking poles. Like these are things that I would not use unless I would go on an experience like this again. And so it just didn't make sense to buy these things that I would only use like once a year if that, going on an experience like this. And all up, to hire my rental gear, I had waterproof pants, down pants, hiking pants, so 3 pairs of pants. I had a down jacket, a waterproof jacket, head torch, hiking poles, snow gloves, liner gloves, sleeping bag, duffel bag, and I think that's it. Yeah, so to hire all of that for I think it was about 8-9 days, it was about 300 Australian, which is so good. Like 300, it was like 350 or something like that. Which is, yeah, so good considering that like the down jacket probably would have been $300 from Kathmandu, right? So I felt so good being able to only spend that much money. I thought it was going to be a lot more to hire all of that gear and all of that equipment. And then we went back to our resort and got our duffel bag all packed and our day pack all packed. As the next day was the first day on the mountain. And so leading up to the first day, we did a lot of like self-inquiry, and a lot of introspection with mountains and marathons. Like each day we did check-ins and check-outs and journal prompts and meditations. And it was so powerful being able to do so much internal observation of your thoughts, your fears, your feelings, and how you're like coping coming into the mountain. And it was such a beautiful way to get to know everyone and connect with people before spending 7 days with them on the mountain. So I felt so excited. Like all my check-ins, I was so excited. I had a lot of energy and I was just like absolute stoking stoking about being on the mountain. So the next day we woke up and day one was again such an exciting day. Like I think there was a lot of anticipation and a lot of preparation for the mountain, and it was just like it was real. It was real by day one. We made our way to the first gate and the entrance, and we were there for quite a few hours because they needed to check everyone in, make sure all the porters, and the porters are essentially people that carry all the like food, the tents. We had a toilet as well, like a portable toilet, which is incredible, instead of using like the hole in the ground squat thing. So they carry all of these things on their head up to each base camp, each camp that we hiked to each day. And so there were like 100 porters because there were so many of us. So we were there for quite a few hours before actually starting our hike up the mountain. But day one was incredible. You hike through a rainforest. And so you're in like this oasis of greenery. And it was quite a misty day. So they had this like enchanted, like mystical forest vibe going on. Just imagine like a green enchanted forest with all these different plants and vinery, and it was just beautiful. So we checked into our first base, like our camp where we were staying, and this is when we sort of really get a sense of what it's going to be like sleeping conditions wise each night. So the tents were quite big. We had a 2-person tent. Georgia and I were in the same tent, and we also had a raised bed, which again, incredible. Like the Africa Visa tour company is just amazing how they take care of you and the equipment that they have. And so we weren't actually sleeping on a mattress on the floor, which was epic because it keeps you elevated from the cold. And so we were on the little like trestle, yeah, like elevated from the floor, which is amazing. And so you arrive to the camp, your tent is set up, the trestle's set up, your mattress is put on the bed, like it's pretty much ready for you. And your duffel bag, which is carried by your porter, which has like your sleeping bag, any of your heavier stuff that you don't want to carry yourself during the day, that's in your tent all ready to go. And so the porters actually pass you because they're so used to the altitude. They pass every day. They just like pack up the gear and then they zoom past us. They go so fast. And that really allows us to get to camp each night and everything's set up and ready to go. Even like the dinner tent, or where we had like dinner and breakfast and lunch, that was all set up every day. So shout out to the Africa Visa team. They were incredible to climb with. So the next morning we are woken at 5 a.m. I believe. I think we got up at 5 a.m. every day. And they bring like this little basin. Think of it as like a soup bowl, like a big soup bowl of hot water. And this is called washi washi. So they come around each morning at 5 a.m. They bring a little hot thing of water for washi washi. And pretty much like you just bring in this little tub of water and you bring like a little face flannel and you pretty much just like, that's your shower. So the first morning was so funny. Georgia and I butt naked in our tent with this tiny little basin of warm water and our little like paper soap, washing our armpits and just like trying to wash ourselves as much as we could because it gets quite dusty on the mountain. And that was quite funny. Yeah, doing that in the morning was quite cold. But anyway, so that was a whole experience in itself. Moving on from the washi washi. So we then, you bring out your duffel bag and have that packed before breakfast. We would then go into the tent and have breakfast, which pretty much consisted of, we had like toast, all like the kinds of spread, like Nutella, jam, honey. I think maybe they had peanut butter. And then we would have, most mornings we would have eggs. And some mornings we also had pancakes, and that was pretty much it. They just wanted to feed us a lot of carbs in the morning because generally on the mountain your body moves better burning carbs than like your protein sources. And then coffee, of course. Coffee, they had Milo, which so many of the Americans and all the other people that are non-Australian were like, what is this? So that was so funny, like just seeing the cultural experience of people that came to the mountain and they had, the Australian delicacies like Tim Tams. Like, I didn't know Tim Tams were an Australian thing. So it was quite interesting to like just observe the different cultural experiences. And then we came out and got our day packs packed. There's another video here of the day packs and just sort of like what day one or day two, I should say, looked like at the camp that we were on. And then they actually sang to us day two just before we headed off for the big hike. And that was so incredible. They sang to us so much, and seeing the porters and the guides all come together and sing was just incredible. And there was this one song they sung that became my favorite song. It's quite well known on the mountain. And it goes like this: Jambo, Jambo Bana, Abari Gani, uzuri sana, wakeri, wakani bishwa, Kilimanjaro, Hakuna Matata. Hakuna Matata. And then they would just like sing this song the whole time. I'm getting goosebumps, just like being back in the energy of the music and the singing and the dancing, and just their spirits coming through. It was such a highlight of the trip, and being able to do this before getting on the mountain just brings your your energy and your stoke levels to like such a peak. And they really believe in like positivity, and they would often say, be strong, be positive. And the way that they supported us on the mountain with their spirit and their love, like really does, I believe, change whether someone has like the group, whether people will summit, and the success rate and the percentage that people summit the mountain. On average, the summit rate is like not very high. I think it's like 70, like 60, 70% of people summit, which means like 30 to 35% of people don't summit. And so like I really believe that that has a lot to do though with not someone's receptivity to the altitude sickness, but actually the team, the porters, the spirit, like the mindset that you go into the experience. And so having them lift our spirits every single day was just incredible. So I'm not going to go too deep into like every single day, because obviously there was so much that happened every single day, but I'm just going to give you a sort of a rundown on my personal experience of each day, and then more on the actual summit night. As yeah, that like I could go on for hours about like my insights each day, but I just want to share like the key things. So day 2 was incredible. This is where we sort of started to get more into like the rocky terrain. We then had a little bit more of like the rainforest jungle vibe, where we saw monkeys. We saw quite a few monkeys actually, and like lots of birds, lots of spider webs. Like it was still, there was a lot of life, a lot of greenery. And as we then got to the end of day 2, that's where we started to notice that the altitude was really kicking in. And this is where I noticed my first altitude sickness symptoms, and I felt really nauseous. At one point, I had to stop and like close my eyes and literally breathe, because I was like, I was sure I was going to throw up. And it was even interesting just like noticing my internal thoughts of like, oh shit, like I'm already feeling this way and it's only day 2. Like, what if I don't summit? And it was an opportunity for me to lay my mental foundations of like, yeah, Nikki, this is going to be hard. Like, you didn't sign up for this because you thought it was going to be easy. It's going to be hard. Like, accept that now. And it was opportunity for me to actually lay those mental foundations early, which was actually really supportive for me on summit night. And I'll get to that why and why that was then. So luckily someone gave me a nausea tablet. I had that, and within 15 minutes I was fine, and back to my normal self. So apart from that, day 2 was incredible. Day 3 was also an incredible day, probably my favorite day. I had incredible conversations with people on the mountain, and I was able to connect with a couple of the male leadership partners. So there were 4 leadership partners, and essentially they were people that would support everyone mentally, emotionally, spiritually on the mountain, and give them support if the other 2 co-founders, Jamin and Jordan, were maybe busy or, weren't there to support everyone. And so I had some really empowering, incredible conversations with Chris and Matt, and was able to talk to them about some of the things that I've been really struggling with in relation to my connection with masculine men, like masculinity. And, have really been struggling to meet men that are a representation of healthy masculine energy. And unfortunately, yeah, the men that I've been connecting with here in Gold Coast just have been walking red flags. And it's been incredible for me to like have the discernment to read energy, and also like have the discernment when something doesn't feel right, or I notice red flags in someone, that I can like name that on a date, or name that after a date and be like, hey, I don't actually feel that we're aligned, and if you want to know, these are the reasons why, and be able to really speak into my truth and invite someone into um, the opportunity to step into the more embodied masculine man. Generally, because I ideally want to attract like quite a spiritual, safe, heart-centered man. And so I knew that like any man that wants to be that also has to be willing to have those kinds of conversations. But anyways, so I was just chatting to Maddie and Chris about um, where within myself there might be like a blind spot, or how I can approach this by maybe doing some self-inquiry and looking at myself and maybe why I'm attracting these kinds of men, and whether, yeah, there's just something in that for me. And I had some really, really beautiful conversations with them. Um, Matt asked me this really beautiful question around my relationship with my own masculine energy, my own inner masculinity. And he said, what's your relationship like with your inner man? And that really triggered me, because my relationship with my inner man is not one of love. It's actually one of a lot of judgment. And so I like have really neglected that relationship with the internal masculine in myself. And we need, as women, we need internal masculine energy. Think of it as not man, but like structure, boundaries, stability. Like stability is a key pillar of the masculinity. And so if someone like myself, who has so many ideas in my business, like I'm always wanting to do new things, events, programs, ideas, like that's very feminine, very like flighty, airy, flowy, creative. But I also recognize where if I don't have masculine energy, I actually lose a lot of grounding and I take on too much and I lose my foundations. And so as a woman, it's really important that we are able to cultivate a healthy balance between both feminine and masculine energy. And if we think of masculine energy as like something that's not useful because we're women, that's when we start to become unbalanced. We lack stability, we lack consistency, we lack, the discipline to take care of ourselves and actually honor our self-care practices and sit down to do the meditation and put your shoes on to go for the run. And so I realized where actually my relationship with my inner man was this, yeah, like I really neglected that, because my perception of my inner man is like controlling. My perception of my inner man is um like demanding and like hard and pressure. And actually I learned that from my dad, and like receiving that from him. And so this is where like I got to notice this huge block in myself and also heal my representation of the masculine, because although those are some of the things I experienced from my dad, I made it mean that it was really bad when that was actually his form of love. Like that was how he loved me, was his care of taking care of me in that way, and being hard on me was his form of love. And so I realized I'd like created this story around that being this really bad thing. And so it makes sense why, I really like neglected that. And then Chris and I had a really beautiful conversation around where I'm not being more embodied in my truth. And yeah, it was such an incredible experience, because on the mountain, you're hiking for like 6 to 8 hours a day. You have so much time. There's no distractions, there's no work, no Netflix, no reading, like, there's no time to do that. And so you have all this spaciousness to think, to reflect on your life, to consider like what you want and what you desire. And then, working with mountains and marathons, these incredible people not just the leadership partners, but like everyone that was there gave you an opportunity to have really deep and meaningful conversations with people about your life. And like, holy shit, that was probably one of the most powerful parts about the mountain, was not actually the summit, but the opportunities to have the spaciousness to be with your deeper truth and to have conversations and open up about that and be vulnerable with other people. So day 3 was incredible, like my favorite day. Day 4 was quite the opposite, and it was really hard because after experiencing altitude sickness on day 2 and then having this incredible experience on day 3, I thought I'd be fine. I was like, oh, I feel amazing. Like maybe I won't get any more symptoms. But day 4, the altitude sickness was so hard. And this was one of the physical hardest days that I'd experienced on the mountain, up until summit. And so some of the things that I was experiencing was like, I just felt so tired. Like I would take 5 steps and I would be like puffing and my legs would be heavy. And it felt like I was like wearing a mask and I could barely breathe and I had a 40-kilo backpack on. And so my body just felt so heavy. I had no energy, like I was really exhausted and just wanted to rest like every 10 minutes. And the nausea started to kick in again, which I had again the nausea tablets, but it was just like there was no ease, there was no break, it was just constant. And I really battled with my mental well-being that day and really had to muster up a lot of what I actually learned at my silent meditation retreat about suffering. And a lot of the mantras that I recited to myself that day is anicca, anicca, which means impermanence. And so I was just reminding myself that today feels really fucking hard, but it's not going to be forever. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. And tomorrow is a new day, and the next day we summit, and next week I'm going to be off this mountain. So enjoy it, Nikki. Like, don't cling to yesterday's incredible experience. Just surrender to the experience. And that really helped me through all the suffering. The suffering. Yeah. Yeah. And that day, actually, although it was my hardest day physically, it was when we was able to get past the first half of the day, which was pretty much just like uphill, up Barango Rock, which is like this huge rock wall. Again, there's like some videos here on YouTube. This huge rock wall, and it's quite technical terrain as well. A lot of like huge footholds and really big steep inclines. But once we made it to the top of that wall, the whole Africa Visa team, all 100 of them, started to sing for us. This is when we started to also get above the clouds. And so you could see like the clouds, like we were literally like in heaven. And this was one of the most empowering feelings. Like I was crying with gratitude at the beauty that I was witnessing. And it was just, yeah, breathtaking. Like being there was like this feeling of almost what I thought it would be like to summit, of like euphoria. And it was so funny because there were people that would be also hiking from other companies, and they would see us and the Africa Visa team and they would be like, holy shit, like you guys look like you're having so much fun. I want to be hiking with you guys. And that was so cool. Like you can see the Africa Visa team, they were like so proud of what they've created, and the experience that they create for us. So day 4, once we got to that camp, oh my God, my bed never felt more good. And this is when it really like became quite cold and really hard to breathe. Um, Overnight, it got so cold that I had to like wear my balaclava so that I could like generate heat from my own exhales, because without my balaclava, you would like wake up the next morning and your throat would literally be frozen. Like it was so cold overnight. And I was warm in my sleeping bag, but just breathing the cold air was freezing. And this is where I first started to get sick. Just when working against altitude wasn't hard enough, I then started to get sick. And so, like, to be fair, I had a bit of a cold before I left for Africa, and took some medication, and I thought I was like to the end of it and fine. But I think it's kind of maybe lingered and then got re-triggered back on the mountain. So that was really, really hard, like quite a sore throat, and a runny nose to begin with, which makes it even harder to breathe through your nose. And then through the next day, that's when my coughing really started to flare up. It was quite like, yeah, quite chesty. And that became quite difficult. But I must admit, the next day was not as hard as the day before. And so that was really supportive. And it was actually the first day I didn't get nausea on the mountain. So although I did start to get sick, day 5, I didn't have nausea, which was great. And energy-wise was a little bit better than the day before. So I got through day 5, and then day 6 was the day that we went from base camp and we did our final summit to the top. And so leading up to the summit, what happens is you actually, the day before, you sleep from about 2 p.m. to about 9 p.m. So you sleep during the day, you get up, you have dinner, you then go back to your tent, you put on all your clothing, like multiple layers. I had 2 thermals, a shirt, a jumper, a fleece, a jacket, and my snow jacket over the top. Yes, that many layers, plus balaclava and a full head balaclava. It was very cold. So you get on all your little snow gear and then you make your way back to the tent, and we do our final debrief before we summited around 10:30, 11 p.m. And so you actually summit overnight so that when you get to the top, you can watch the sunrise. And so we started out on our summit to the top, and because the oxygen level is so thin, the steps that you take on summit night are like little shuffles. It's like if you were to put your foot halfway in between like your toes. So you would like literally do half a step and then half a step. And you have your hiking poles because you're like trying to like keep yourself from falling over because the air is getting so thin. And so an hour into summit night, I started to get a jarring headache and I started to get really dizzy. And I was like, oh no, oh no. We are only 1 hour in. We're not summiting till 5 a.m. the next day. Oh no. And like the overwhelm of not summiting really like consumed me. And that first hour was really hard. And we got to our first break after that hour, and I sat down and started crying. I was like, this is so hard. I feel dizzy. And my porter my porter was so sweet. He came up to me and he's like, "Let me take your day pack." And I had this like ego part of me being like, "No, like I'm strong. I can do it." He was like, "Let me take your pack." And all I had in my pack was water because you don't want to carry anything else. Like it's hard enough. So all I had was my sack of water, 1.5 liters, and then also my thermal flask, which you need for the top, otherwise your water sack will freeze. That's it. And just him taking my pack was like this huge weight, more so emotionally, off my shoulders. And so that was really supportive. And yet, even just holding my own body weight and the hiking poles, it was so hard because I was already experiencing dizziness. And as the hours went on, with each hour that passed, I started to experience more and more altitude symptoms. And so by the second hour in, that's when I started to notice that I wasn't just feeling dizzy, but cognitively, I was feeling quite groggy. And so not only was I feeling like lightheaded, but it was almost as if the feeling of like being really, really tired started to kick in. And so we would, do 20 minutes and then we would stop to breathe. And I would literally just put my head on my hiking pole and rest my head like this just to like breathe and be like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I just need to like rest my head on my hiking pole. And my porter was so sweet. He'd like come up behind me and he'd put his hand on my back and be like, "You're doing so well. You're doing so well." And I would be like, "Okay, I can do this." And it was such a test of resilience where like hour after hour after hour, I was just telling to myself, like, don't fall asleep. Come on, Nikki. You can do it. Keep on swimming, keep on swimming, keep on swimming. And like at one point they started to play music and they played this honestly between the delirium and like feeling crazy, some of the music that they put on, I was like, am I actually listening to this? They put on this song, which was like an Arnold Schwarzenegger remix. And the song is like, up, down, up, down. Come on, more energy. And we would just like walk to the pacing of the song, like up, down, and step, and step, and step. And oh my gosh, I can't tell if it was making it worse because I was like, like what is going on? Or it was making it better because I could like walk to the beat of the song. Oh, and then about 4 hours in, the hallucinations started to kick in. So I started to like see things, like people's shadows were like morphing or like moving or something. And at one point, I was standing behind this guy, and I swear his shadows were like moving, but all he was doing was just walking. But I swear his shadows were moving, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing things. Come on, Nikki, snap out of it. You could do it. And I like literally felt drunk. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, are we there yet? And because it was pitch black, like you look up and you can see lights of people like right above you. And you would literally get a sense of this, like the steepness. I don't know if that's the right word. The steepness, like the elevation of the incline that we were on. Like you would stop and you would literally look up and see light and be like, holy shit, like we are getting some serious elevation. No wonder, no wonder we feel so drunk because we're going so high up right now. And so, like, it was just like, keep going, Nikki, like 1 hour at a time, girl, you got this. 1 hour at a time, like the whole way through. And it was when we got to Stella Point, which is 1 hour before the final push, I sat down and I literally just laid on the rock and I was like, oh, I feel sick. And I sat up and I just threw up. And there wasn't much to throw up because like your appetite gets really suppressed like on like for me it was the last 2 days I could barely eat. So there wasn't much to throw up. But at that stage, like the porters were kind of like, oh, okay, like they were keeping an eye on me because they do determine like if it's safe enough for you to summit or not. And if they don't think it's safe, like they will take you down straight away. And so I was like, come on, Nikki, like you are making it to the top. Even if you have to throw up the whole way, we are getting to the top. And so I was like trying to show them, I was like, I'm good, I'm fine, like I fucking got this. And so they gave us hot tea, which, oh my God, sitting at Stella Point with a cup of hot tea was like heaven. They're like, you're not there yet. Don't let the sign fool you. And this is when the sun just started to come up, which was beautiful because it started to like we didn't need our head torches at this stage and we could start to see the summit like of where we were walking to for that final hour. And so the final hour, they must have put something in that tea because I started to feel good. And I think that the combination of like the adrenaline and the excitement of summiting actually started to help, like the hallucination subsided and the feeling of being drunk actually started to subside a bit as well, which was really good because like I wanted to be cognitively aware and enjoy the experience. And so I was so glad that by the time we got to the base of just being able to summit, I actually came to and started to really enjoy the experience and enjoy the views and enjoy the incredible sunrise that was starting to come up behind us. And so with every step, I got a little bit closer. Every step, I could taste the success. Every little step was bringing me closer to the top of the mountain. And it was like honestly like that. It was just incredible, like being able to taste the ending, being closer and closer. And I made it. I made it all the way to the top. And like seeing the sign at the end of the summit and being able to touch the sign and like turn around and look down at how far we had just walked from 10:30 the night before, hiking overnight in the freezing temperatures, nearly feeling like I was going to pass out, unsure if I was gonna make it, and standing at the top. It was like euphoria. And I sat down. I sat on Grandmother Killy next to Georgia. And I just cried. I just cried. And it was so beautiful up there. So beautiful. And it was a full 360 view of being above the clouds and seeing there were nearby mountains that you could see, two like nearby peaks. You could see the peaks of the other mountains and, you know, seeing other people come up and the looks on their faces and the lights in their eyes. And it was incredible. But we didn't get to experience it for very long because you're at the peak of the altitude at that stage. So it's like you're there for 20 minutes and then boom, that's it. And so it was really like, we didn't really have like a full hour to really take it all in. It was sort of, yeah, there was I guess, a sense of urgency there, which, was really challenging when you're just trying to take it in. But the porters, or the guides that we had, I think there was about 20 guides with us. And so each person had a guide to take care of them. You could see that there was a sense of, okay, make sure you get your photos because, we need to go down soon. And so I got my photos. We then got a group photo, which I'll leave here. And it's so funny. You should see my face in the photo. I'm like, my eyes are like half closed. I look drunk. I look like I'm struggling. But internally, I felt euphoric. So I did that. I got my pack on, had some water, and I looked at my guide, and he was like, "Let's go." And I was like, "Oh, okay." He put his arm around my arm, so like we linked elbows, and he started running, and I was like, "Oh, like we're going, like we're running." And when I say running, I mean like I was being pulled forward by the sheer speed of how fast he was running. And I was like, holy shit, like, why are we going so fast? And he looked at me and he's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm okay. I'm just really tired. And again, he put his arm, he's like, we're going, let's go. And I think at that stage, I started to realize that like he was concerned about me. He was concerned about how I was dealing with the altitude. And so we get back to Stella Point and we turn right and we go down a different path downwards. So up is quite a long time because we go through quite a rocky terrain and there's not a lot of like dirt and soft ground. And so it's a lot better to get elevation. However, on the way down, you actually go through very soft terrain. It's sort of like almost a consistency of sand and small rock. And so the descent is very steep descent through sand. And it only takes about 2.5 hours down. So it's a lot quicker. I think as a combination of as you step on sand, you slide and he's running. So you've just summited up this freaking mountain overnight, but it's like running a marathon and you finish the finish line, but you still have to run home. And so it was so hectic on the way down. Like, oh, I was so tired. Like the tiredness was kicking in. My feet were so sore. At this stage, I thought my left toenail was falling off. The nausea was kicking back in, and I was saying to him, I was like, I don't feel good. And his name was Danny, who was my porter. He just kept grabbing my arm and he was a machine. He knew all the little paths to go down, like to swivel through this descent. I didn't personally get any videos at all. I was like, I'm just going to rely on someone else to get videos. But again, like you can see the nature of what the descent was like on the video. And we had to stop like quite a lot because I was dry reaching a lot and vomiting. And they say that the best way to cure that is just more oxygen. The quicker you can get down the mountain, the better. And at one point I saw this guy and he had both his arms around these two porters and they were flying down the mountain. So like obviously certain people that they were really worried about, they wanted to get down the mountain as quickly as possible. So I was really grateful for Danny. But eventually, we get down to the ending of this like gravel section and it flattens out a little bit and the nausea started to subside. And although I was just so tired, I did actually start to feel a little bit better. And I was the first one that made it back to camp. And I sat down and they took my shoes off and they gave me a juice box, which was the best juice box ever. I couldn't even finish it though, because it was just like your body just doesn't want to eat. It's just like in survival, um your digestion shuts down. Like digestion's not essential for survival. And so yeah, your body's really like in a state of survival at that point. And so I got back to camp, and because I was the first to descend, I was able to go to my tent and actually rest quite a bit while I waited for everyone else to come back down, which was really great. We then made it back down and I had a rest for a few hours. We had lunch and then we did a final 2-hour descent. And so this is day 6 at this stage, to our camp that we would sleep at on day 6. So day 7 was then our final day of descending. It was a full day of descent, which was a lot. Like at that stage I mentioned, I thought my left big toenail was going to fall off. And what had happened was my left toenail actually started to get ingrown. Oh, and it was so painful, like, because when you're descending, your feet slip to the front of your shoe. And so it just like the pressure on my toe just hurt so much. And we got to halfway through the day and my toes started to go numb, which was slightly concerning, but also I couldn't feel the pain anymore, which was kind of like relieving. And I was like, this is a later problem. I'm not going to deal with this on the mountain at all. And so we made our final descent, and coming back into the greenery, going back into the rainforest, came back into the enchanted like life. And you also come back to a ton of oxygen. And so at one point, I've got like spiritual music playing, like medicine music playing out loud. And I was walking with one of the female guides and I felt like high. I felt you like this feeling of like alive. The forest felt alive. I felt like the forest was talking to me with love. And yeah, I was very I felt good. The last few hours were incredible. And there was also a feeling of grief of like, oh my gosh, like we're leaving, like it's done, it's over. And so there was sort of like, the levity of feeling high and feeling love, but also like the depth of feeling grief and feeling sad to say goodbye to all of it. And we came back to the final gate and we all got a beer. And excuse me, we all got a beer and uh yeah, just like laughed in like awe, laughed in awe of what we'd just done. That the night before, we literally were standing on the very top where you'd look up and it would be like a speck, and we're like, we were up there last night or like a night and a half ago. And now we're all the way at the base of the mountain. Like, holy shit. So just to like contemplate that over a day and a half, we had fully descended from this mountain, was even that was just so hard to fathom, like how far that we had come. And so yeah, I just want to take a pause to like breathe, because that was a lot. I felt like I just went on this journey and relived the mountain. Coming back home to, or not back home, but back to where we were staying, the first thing I did was get naked and have a shower. And oh Lord, that shower, even though it was like a dribbly shower and the water pressure wasn't good, it was the best shower I'd ever had. Because I can tell you what, by day 3, it was way too cold to have washy-washy. Like I was not getting butt naked on that mountain by day 3. It was too cold and freezing. And so like the washy by day like 5, 6, it was kind of just like a cloth and just wiping your body and face wipes, like baby wipe shower. And so to like have a full body shower and wash my hair, like I realized how I took showers for granted. I was like, I will never, ever not appreciate the beauty of having a shower, washing my hair, considering that there are places in the world where they don't have access to showers. So I had a lot of gratitude for like these really small things when we came back home, like a bed and, you know, like full space and like having a mirror and just like washing your hands and soap. And yeah, it was these really little small things that I felt a lot of gratitude towards when coming back off the mountain. And, you know, the next day we gathered together as a team to start the deep introspective work of reflecting on the mountain and reflecting on the wisdom that the mountain imparted. And there was a lot there for me. There was a lot there for me. You know, I really took time to consider my life and how I don't put myself at the front of the fulfillment that I receive. And what that means is like I get so much fulfillment from what I do in my business. It brings me so much joy and gratitude and like purpose to be able to help women and change their lives and wake them up and do podcasts like this. I get a lot of fulfillment, like being able to hear people reach out to me and tell me what they thought of my podcast episodes or whether a podcast episode has changed the way they think about themselves, like little things like that. But being on that mountain, I experienced a level of fulfillment in myself that had nothing to do with my business. And I realized that there was this like world of fulfillment that I get outside of my business that I'd not been giving time and energy to. And I never really considered that these experiences are opportunities to really contribute to the greater fulfillment of my life. Because I only really consider like my business and like how I serve other people and how I help people. And it's like so much of my energy has just been like, how do I serve the world? How do I serve everyone else? And on the mountain, I just had like none of that was there. And there were like people serving me. And like all the leadership partners, like there every day being like, how can we contribute and make her life? And obviously everyone there, but like being fully served. I just felt like so at peace. And I felt so happy. And I could just see how like I'd not been prioritizing like my own fulfillment in my own life outside of like what I do for my purpose. And it was like the mountain was like, he also came here to be a human being. The mountain was like showing me like he also came to be a human being and experience it all, like experience life, climb mountains, travel. And I just like stay in my little bubble. And I was like, yeah, I just felt like a free spirit, like a bird that had been in a zoo its whole life. And it has the room to fly in the zoo, but then it gets to like just fly outside of the zoo and outside of this cage and fly wherever it desires. And that's how I felt on this mountain. Like I've been flying and I've been enjoying my little like my little environment that I had been in, but being in a completely different world, a completely different environment, I just felt like this bird that could fly free. Yeah, I just felt really free. And like one thing that I'm really integrating and taking from the mountain is how like when I sit down and do my goals every year, like all I really focus on is goals around my business or goals with personal growth. Like maybe I want to be more in my feminine or um like work on self-expression or overcoming my fear of judgment. And that's been beautiful and it's been incredible. And what about the greater experiences that I want to have in my life? And even down to the way that I spend my weekends. Like, it's not necessarily about being able to travel, but being able to invite in play and adventure into my life. And instead of on the weekend, like spending the whole weekend doing things that again are like study or reading or like going for a beach walk, which are all things I absolutely adore. It's like getting in the car and driving down to Byron Bay and going to Crystal Castle just because I can, and like these are things that I just haven't prioritized in my life that coming back home just feel like a deep sense of importance to the quality of the life that I desire to live now, where play and adventure is a focus and that my whole existence isn't based on work and my whole existence isn't based on always giving and serving everyone else around me, but also like how I serve myself and how I do things just for the sake of wanting to feel alive and wanting to feel joy and wanting to just like be in nature. And some of the integration, although has been, I won't say easy, I would say beautiful and empowering and expansive. Some of the integration has been really hard as well. Like there's been challenge in coming back to this life that I've created and like noticing where I'm feeling unfulfilled and feeling just the like stagnation of being here. Um, there's also been like a bit of sadness. Like I miss the mountain. Like I would go next week again. Yeah, I really miss the mountain, like the people, connecting with my best friend Georgia, like being around these beautiful women and these safe men, the culture, like yeah, I'm like really missing the mountain. It was just so beautiful there. So there's also been like some sadness that I'm just allowing myself to be with and not like pushing it away and allowing that grief to be a reminder of how much I desire to invite that kind of like love and connection into my life. But I also now, like right now in my life, have never felt more clear of what I want to create and how I want to empower people in my business and in this space and online as a leader. Like I didn't mention this part, but when we got back from the mountain, Georgia and I went to Nema Baby Village, which is an orphanage for babies with special needs. And we spent a few hours at this orphanage. And to get there, we really drive through the local areas and you really see a sense of how people live. And I'm gonna be like fully honest with you, but I came back online and I went on Instagram and I honestly just like couldn't bear to see how much superficiality, like scrolling certain people's like feed and seeing the stuff that they were posting and the insignificance of it, and also like where I've been doing that, like where I have been like posting things and worrying about shit that just doesn't matter, or like putting out content that just like isn't authentic and a representation of my heart, but putting out content that I think people want to see. And it really just like opened my eyes to um like where I was judging myself, because anyone we judge is always a representation of what we're judging in ourselves. So like me judging people's superficial content was actually, the judgment I was having of where I was still doing that, and that was really eye-opening. And it's now really invited me into like what kind of content I want to share, and like actually the messaging behind my content, and not trying to just get followers and fucking go viral. And like I just don't desire that. Like, it wasn't something I desired before Africa, but now I just see how many people are out there to just go viral. And like, how are you actually contributing to people? And these are questions that feel really important to me. Like, how am I actually helping people? Like, when someone comes and sees my content, do they actually learn something? Or are they actually just getting a 5-second snippet of a video that I'm trying to make go viral, which is not serving anyone but myself? And it's been really hard to like come back into the online space and like really find who I am again, or like find my place in the online space, I guess. Um, and so I think I felt a bit alone, and I'm really embracing being okay with that. I'm really embracing being okay with that and just sharing what feels good to my heart. I've noticed that like looking at other people's content less has really been supportive. And so, um, yeah, if you're a friend of mine and you're listening and I don't like your stuff anymore, it's because I'm just not scrolling anymore, and I'm not watching people's stories as much. And that's been really supportive as I am coming back into my values, coming back into like what I want to share, the energy of what I want to share, and like really just protecting that energy. That's been really supportive. Um, I just feel more clear, more certain of who I want to be and who I want to help. And that feels really empowering right now. And I'm really leaning into connecting into that more, and that being a center of my integration right now. What's deeply important to me and how I want to contribute to others, like the actual significance of that contribution. And am I serving others, or am I still in ways serving myself? And how might I become more altruistic or like selfless in my pursuit of being able to give? That has nothing to do with what I get in return, but the fulfillment of being able to express from my heart. But the fulfillment of being able to express from my heart. Yeah, and I like that. I just feel like there's so much freedom in that, because I just see like I see my past and how much I've tried to prove myself in the online space for so long, and like there's still work for me to integrate around this. But I do recognize where there have been parts of me that feel like I have something to prove. And it's exhausting, like having to prove oneself when we really cannot control how people see us. We can't control what people think of us. And so, this pursuit of being able to try and control how people see us by proving ourselves is like a waste of our magic and our energy and our authentic expression. And I just feel like this weight off my heart, opening up the possibility now of exploring a life where I don't need to prove. I feel really empowered after my experience on the mountain, and there is so much medicine that is still here. There is so much more that I could explain, and maybe I'll do a part two, where I'll just speak into like the personal development that I'm leaning into. Like there's so much around the masculine, and my inner man and my relationship with other men as well, like calling in a safe masculine man. There's like a lot there. So I feel that maybe a part two where I can just speak into like the personal development aspect of that would be really supportive. But in the meantime, I really want to encourage you all to consider embarking on your own adventure, whether it's climbing a mountain or maybe it's just pursuing a personal goal, like running a marathon. Or maybe for you, it's something different, like, starting a thing that you've been putting off for a really long time. Or maybe it's leaning into creativity. Like, this is one thing that I know so many women have. And maybe for you, it's like painting, like starting painting or starting poetry or drawing or pottery. So it's like I want to encourage you to lean into like, where is there an edge or a fear for you that you can lean into, that if you were to do it, it would only be rewarding for you, that it's not about helping other people or helping your family or your friends or your clients or your colleagues. It's like, no, something that is just for the fulfillment of your soul. And if this inspires you and you want to be in a space and have your own guide to help you be guided on your, journey of summiting your internal mountain, so to speak, of your life, then I'm calling in women to work with right now who are actually a representation of that. As I am stepping into more of my authentic expression in my heart, I really desire to work with women who can actually mirror that back to me as a client as well. I feel so called to work with women who desire this. So called to guide women who also value this. And so if that is you and you feel your heart's calling, you feel this deeper desire to lean into your life and the expansion of who you want to be and what you want to create and what you want to do, then send me a message on Instagram or apply for coaching in the link in my bio. And let's chat more. I want to get to know more about you and whether you would actually be a beautiful fit for this space, and whether I am that guide to be able to support you in your greater expansion. Thank you for being here and supporting the podcast. I love you all so much. And I will see you in the next episode. Jambo,
Jambo bwana, habari gani? nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata. Nikiwa na Eniki,
hakuna matata.
Samiti alikwenda,
hakuna matata.
Na leo ni nyumbani,
hakuna matata.
Nakwenda kukumisi. I'm gonna miss you.
We miss you.
Yeah.
Matata.
Oh,